Welcome to In Confidence, where what we share in confidence helps us grow in confidence. Today's episode is about something we don't talk enough about, which is failing on purpose, and in fact, even chasing failure. That's right, chasing failure. Not success, but failure. Not in a reckless way, but in a bold and intentional way. My guest today is my best friend, Jane Park, who calls it having a failure goal, like failure as the goal, which I think is kind of crazy. You know, she is a very successful entrepreneur, and the question she always gets is, hey, what's the one lesson you learned as an entrepreneur on your path to success? And she always responds, I learned that it's important to chase failure. So the simple idea that we're going to talk about today is, if you're not hearing enough no's, you're probably not aiming high enough. My best friend Jane is an entrepreneur, a former executive. She started her career at BCG. She led innovation for Howard Schultz at Starbucks. Yes, she's the one that brought music into Starbucks. And she's the founder of Julep and Tokki. She's even taken a company public. She's someone I admire deeply for her incredible heart, warmth, and deep insight. She's the person, she's my shame buddy. We talk about that. She is the person that I turn to in my darkest moments. And she's going to talk about why failure isn't the opposite of success. It's often the doorway to it. Let's listen in. Jane, welcome to In Confidence.
Thanks for having me.
I am so excited to have you here because you're one of my besties. So this is a real treat for me. Now, we always start our sessions with, what are you most proud of from the last 12 months of your life?
I think when I think these days about what I'm proud of, it's not a single thing, an event. It's more that I think in a very difficult environment out in the world that I have found a way to get out of bed every morning is a good win, and find moments of joy. I think that is sort of the thing that I feel most internally proud of.
I love that. So it's not necessarily a specific moment. It's more of, you always teach me, like, how have you gotten stronger? You always ask me, have we got stronger since last year? So it's more of an approach or a feeling.
Yeah, I think it's then speaking of confidence, and you can have confidence that you can go through the hard things because you have shown it to yourself every day, and that it's not one big thing that gives you that. It's not one big event. I can't think of, honestly, like a single big thing that I feel proud of. You know, it is the day-to-day things that I feel the most excited about, and the things that where if I fall down, what I care most about.
I love that. All right, for those who don't know you, just for our audience, can you tell folks a little bit about who you are and how you make a difference in the world?
Is this like a resume-y thing, or is it more like any way? Okay.
Any way you want.
Making a difference in the world. You know, I think it's about the small things. I think a lot about what is easy in my power to do that can add a lot of joy to other people's lives. As you know, I have a house on Whidbey Island, and it's my favorite thing ever that friends and family get to go there. And honestly, it's like no skin off my nose if I am not there. So I feel like that's one small thing, but there's so many things where it might be nothing to you to say thank you to the guy who is picking up the garbage in the airplane, you know? Like it is so effortless to try to make a difference in the way people go about the world. So I think the moments of small connection are what I am thinking about a lot these days. And in terms of making a difference, I think it's the connection that has always been important to me.
And that's been a running theme in terms of your professional career. Can you maybe apply that in terms of like all the things that you've been able to do over the last, I would say, 3 decades of impact?
Well, I think everything that I've done in business has been really focused on that. It's helpful to have a mission because it's super hard, as you know. And the only way that you can keep going is to have a North Star and to understand why you're doing what you're doing. And connection for me with the beauty business, it was about seeing women where they were and making life a little bit easier for them. And just sort of, if the brand could say anything at Julep, it was about, I see you juggling all these things. I see you trying to, get yourself out the door while your baby is throwing up, and all the things that women juggle at all times. We're always multitasking in a way that is probably, absorbing a lot in terms of our mental health. So, I think it's sort of connection starts with really feeling seen by people. And so I hope that is what I've been doing in the business world. And my last company, Tokki, was about gifting and creating connection moments through gifting. And I think that's the same thing. The best gifts make you feel seen. Like if I gave you, I don't know what I'd give you, like a golf ball, you'd be like, okay, hi. But what is it that I can be really thoughtful? And when you have a gift that is like, oh my gosh, you really thought about me, you really know me, that feels very different than here's a carnation.
And I love that we're talking about it in this frame, because when I think about all the stages of your career, BCG, Starbucks, Julep, Tokki, you've been really successful, whether it's been innovation at Starbucks or basically raising the most money I've ever seen a woman raise from venture capital, tens of millions of dollars. I love that you more pinpoint it back to connection and mission. And if you can do something small to make someone's day better or the world better, it doesn't have to be big, but you've been able to take that inspiration and scale it in big ways in the business world.
It was, as you were saying that, I was thinking when I pitched Andreessen Horowitz and I didn't know how to put together a venture deck because nobody was showing me, I put, as the first slide, I thought, they have to connect with me. They have to believe in me. They have to know me. So the first slide was just a picture of me as a kid, as an immigrant kid, and then all of the different places that I'd been. And so they had a visual, and honestly, as short Asian women, we do need to sort of set the framework in terms of like, I'm a serious person, right? So I will admit to putting a bunch of logos on there with schools and jobs so that they were like, oh, BCG, Starbucks, Princeton, Yale, just so that they would pay attention. But also I had the 7-Eleven logo because that's what my parents did. And I, had a picture of us when I was little and growing up. And so I think that made a difference. Like, this is a technology company. We were pitching customized subscription boxes, and that took a lot of, software engineering talent on the back end to create our own solution where people could pick whatever they wanted in every beauty box, not just like a standard thing. So it was a technology company, it was a technology investment, but I don't think it would have happened if they didn't feel connected to me.
So today we're going to take a little twist, though, on your story, because if I saw your life story on paper, I'd be like, oh my gosh, this person is incredibly successful, untouchable. And the twist we're going to take on it is you are actually an expert on failure, which for me, seeing all your successes kind of makes me go, huh? Like, we're going to talk about failure. Aren't you one of my most successful friends? And I want to first start off by, why are you an expert on failure? Like, we could spend an hour talking about all the ways you scaled these businesses and all your successes, but you wrote us back when we were prepping this episode and you said, actually, I want to talk about failure in this episode. Can you explain why?
I think the role of failure in achieving our goals is so misunderstood. And it is the fear of failure often holds people back from being who they're meant to be. And I think that is really the goal, like not the most successful, not the whatever. I think all of our goals should be about uncovering who you're meant to be. I think that was a thing that Michelangelo felt about sculpture, that the sculpture is inside the block and you just have to remove everything else to get to it. And the longer I experience the world, that's how I feel. Like there's an internal you, and who are all of your friends and all the experiences that can get, help release you and show what that sculpture is under the block of marble. So failure is the thing that we fear that stops us from uncovering who we're meant to be. Because actually, it's interesting. Failure operates in our brains the way physical pain does. So it travels the same neural pathways. No wonder we want to avoid it at all costs, because it feels bad. It literally feels like somebody stabbed you. It's not in your head. It is going through the same neurons are firing. So it's not enough just to say, don't worry about it. I think really being thoughtful about how you invite it into your life. I like to think about it like achieving failure. It doesn't just happen. You have to go out and get it, because here's the thing. I'm not a fisher, so I'm just going to make up this analogy. But if you want to catch something, right, like a big fish, you're not going to go out with a rod and catch it on your first try. And I think about failure like a big net. If you go out with a big net, then you're going to catch all manner of little failures, but you might also catch the thing that you're looking for. And if you always need to be perfect, which is the enemy of growth, when we try to make sure that every single time you cast your thing, see, I don't know this analogy, but every single time you dip your thing in the water, if you expect it to come up with an enormous tuna, it's not. You're not going to figure out who you're meant to be that way. You have to be open to catching all the things that you didn't mean to catch, the tire, the little minnows, in order to really be able to find what you're looking for.
You've said before, everyone should have a failure goal. How do you define what a failure goal is?
So this is the trick, is to teach your brain that it's a goal. It's something you're going after, not something bad that has happened to you. You're not being stabbed. You're seeking this thing. And I like to, in everyday life, when my daughter was applying to college, I offered her and her friends a prize for every rejection letter they got, right? You and I, when we had our interns, we gave our interns failure goals. Because what happens if you don't have a failure goal is that you feel like you have to be perfect and you want to deliver 100% of what you were asked. If you're asked a failure goal, then they're going to go try to do something crazy, right? Because they got to fail. And as we found when we were trying to give our interns failure goals for getting our face masks back in the pandemic, carried by shops and by institutions, they had to go as far as like asking the Smithsonian to carry our product, right, in order to have a no. And I think that was so freeing. Like, if you're trying to get the no, then it gives you the courage to go after the bigger thing. So they're really sort of courage goals, but it's more fun to call them failure goals, because I do believe in trying to change the way that people think about failure. And we can say all day long till we're blue in the face, it's part of life, it's part of growth, but really deconstructing it and feeling like, how does this work in our bodies? How do we experience it? And then how do we thoughtfully rewire? Because it's everything that, as we know, that is worth doing is hard.
And I love this almost from to, because the from is, if failure is happening to you, you're a victim. You're reactive to it. It is like being stabbed. But what you're describing it is, it's almost like the opposite is mastery. Like, I'm in the control, I'm in the driver's seat of failure, that it doesn't have to feel like being stabbed. It's something that I'm going after. And by the way, success is on the other side of it if I keep going after it.
Yeah. How big is your net? Is your net like teeny tiny, or is your net enormous? And if your net is big, it's going to catch a lot of things other than just that one success you're looking for.
And I will say that when we had our interns together during the pandemic, we keep giving our intern the same assignment. By the way, the intern this summer, she presented all the women who inspire her that have gravitas, of which there are 3 people on the board: Olivia Rodrigo, Michelle Zauner, and Caitlin Toohey, right? These are three women that we don't know. She also had some people in her personal life. And the assignment was go cold email those people, find their managers, found their talent agency, and invite them to be on the podcast. We didn't put Olivia Rodrigo on the list. I think that would be almost, the net would be have to be massive. But with the expectation, you're likely going to get a no, or your email is going to be ignored in the inbox.
And this is something I did learn from Howard Schultz when I was at Starbucks. I forget exactly what the number was, but he said that he had approached 280 people when he was starting Starbucks, and like 270 of them said no. And those are all people with who have probably some financial regret now. But the idea that he could have been rejected like over 200 times was such a freeing thing. So I think I've told you before that I started a spreadsheet, and it didn't have to be in Excel because it wasn't actually doing any math, but it was Jane Park and Howard Schultz on the x-axis and yeses and nos on the y-axis. And now every time I got a no, I had somewhere to put it. It was like, oh, this is my no for the day, because otherwise it's soul wrenching. It's hard when you put your whole life on the line and you say, look, I am building this thing, and will you come with me? And people are like, no, I don't think that's going to work. Like, it just, of course it hurts. It is one of the hardest things as an entrepreneur to hear that your idea is not worthy of people, thinking about further. And if you frame it such that you're looking for hundreds of these things, then when you get 50, which feels like a lot, right? You're like, oh my gosh, 50 times somebody told me I don't think that that's going to work. Then you need something, you need a place to put it, and you need a goal. So when I had 50, it was like, okay, I have 200 more to go.
I love that mentality. And one of the things, though, which I thought was interesting about how you've taught me how to deal with failure is once you're seeking it and you're willing to just accept the fact that you are going to fail at things, because I grew up as a type A perfectionist, raised by a tiger mom, bring home the A+ or the AA+. Like, I was raised that being perfect was the goal. If you flip that around, I love that you also have a second part of the approach, which is you once texted me, there are no regrets, only learnings. And that if you can reflect on how you've gotten stronger, what you've learned from the failure, it makes you stronger to take on the next one. Can you talk a little bit about this philosophy of there are no regrets, only learnings?
The thing is, it actually takes a lot of effort to turn a regret into learning. So it doesn't happen automatically. I think about it like a cake. If you have a bunch of flour and then you put a birthday candle on it and give it to a 7-year-old for their birthday, there's going to be tears. That is not a cake. A regret without extra effort is just flour. It is not a cake. What you have to do is grapple with it. I think the magic words to me are, the next time this happens, I will. If you do not say those words to yourself, the regret is a mistake stays a mistake. It doesn't turn into a learning. This doesn't happen automatically. You have to work at it to make a mistake into learning. You can make a ton of mistakes. I do believe there are such things as mistakes, because if you're lazy and you do not actually hold it in your hand, feel how heavy it is, see the impact it might have had on other people that you didn't intend, and you say those words. This life is full of do-overs. I think sometimes with the same person, you can say, I think I've done this to you. We've had conversations that have been hard, and I've been like, oh, wait, can I just have a do-over? Like, I did not express myself the way I wanted to.
I can do better, and I'm willing to put in the effort to do that.
And sometimes it's not with the same person. Sometimes I have made a mistake with someone, and I think, okay, the next time I'm in this situation, I'm going to do this instead.
Why does it have to be so hard?
It's so
Go
hard.
after failure, and then when you fail, process the regret so it turns into a learning. It's also hard. Okay.
This is a lot of our conversation, right?
It's so hard. Now, what inspired you to adopt this mindset in life and in business?
I don't know if there was any specific inspiration. I think the whole true north has been, how do you figure out who you're meant to be? And how do you take steps towards that? And I think I did used to think, as an immigrant child, and you probably did too, life is going to be easier when I get older. You know, I am going to, I definitely have a lot more financial resources than my parents did as immigrants with no money. I have degrees. I thought that, you know, when I got a house and I had all of these things, that it would be easier. And it turns out it's not. This is something I say to you, right? When you're like, oh my God, I'm like, yeah, life doesn't get easier, it gets harder, and we just have to get stronger. Because it's not true that any of these standard trappings, I mean, some things do make it easier. I will admit to the privilege of not being food insecure the way my parents were. You know, it makes a difference to have table stakes in economic security. But it's not the only thing that makes life easier. And that was a big shock to me. I was like, holy crap, what is happening here that everything isn't easy? Why is it still hard?
And I remember during the pandemic, you sent me that Arthur C. Brooks article about happiness. And one of the things that I wonder about this approach is it does require you to redefine the metrics of success. It does require you to not thrive on external validation. I think the way I was raised was go get some fancy degrees, get the big job, right? Those external markers, the house, like all of those things, that maybe it's the effort, the learning, the growth that is the definition of success versus all these other markers. Does this approach require you to let go of external validation?
It does, in that it's out of the frame. Like, you know, when somebody says, don't think about the elephant, like, you, of course, are going to think about the elephant. I can't tell you, don't care about external validation. It won't work. But you can say, who are you inside, and how much do you know about who that person is, and what are you doing to understand that person and live that person every day? I think that does take a little bit of faith to feel like whoever that is going to be somebody who's worthy. So you have to have that initial leap of faith. And then if that is your life's project, then it's like other things fall out of the frame.
I love that. Can we walk through a story about a time that you failed? Can we walk through a failure goal?
You know, I was thinking about this the other day, and one thing I will say is that the failures that stick with me are the ones that are failures of character. And I hope I haven't had that many where there have been sort of something that I did somewhat knowing that it was not the right thing to do at the time. So a thing I think about all the time is that 9/11, when that happened, I was a junior consultant at BCG. I was pregnant. I was worried about layoffs. And on the day after 9/11, when someone on my team asked me whether he could go home and be with his wife and 2 toddlers, I think my response was your family impacted? You know, I didn't have the humanity. Again, it's about your frame. I think my frame was all about me and was all about what I needed to achieve, and I didn't want to lose this job, and I wanted to finish this project because I was going to have a baby. It was all about me. And I can't tell you, I think about that at least several times a week. At least once a year, I try to find this person somehow to apologize. But that, like, when you have a failure of character, I think that is something that, I mean, my face feels like flesh just thinking about it now. That stays with you. Other things, if you can turn them into lessons, like I can't even remember, oh my God, every day I fail a million times in, something I want to try. Like, I am writing a book and I sent it out to, I don't know, I think my friends in publishing said to send it to 10 agents. And then I did that, and of course, I freaked out and sent it to 10 more, and then 10 more. And, I think at the end it was like 50 agents. And I got a lot of rejections. I created in my folder, I created a rejections folder. I put them in there. And through that, I did find somebody. I'm in the process of rewriting that novel, as you know, because I did have somebody who was enthusiastic. So no's aren't all the same. There were no's like, I don't even know if they read the thing. There were no's that are like, this is not my genre. I'm just not that into it. And then there are no's that are like, oh, you're, like, try again. There's something here. And so parsing it out, like not being so sort of, not thinking that all no's are the same, not being devastated in the same way by every single no, just sort of looking at them and seeing them as human beings. Who are they in this like really hard publishing environment? They're probably not, have all of these things on their plate. They're asked to do social media. They're asked to do their regular jobs. They have less time to do their regular jobs. And if you kind of have empathy for the person who is giving you that rejection, and also just understanding that not all of them are the same. So yeah, I think I ended up tracking it on a app called Query Tracker. And one of my first TikToks, was it my very first one, was showing like, here's all of the, the status of all of the queries out there. Because I know I'm not the only one to go through this. The only thing I think harder than entrepreneurship is writing a book. And so, I think also just sharing it to dissipate the shame. If you hold it inside, it is just a shame black hole that will amass more weight and pull more things in as you go. But that's why we have been each other's shame buddies for so many years. If you have someone who you can call and say, I feel ashamed of this, and they will just listen to you without judgment, I think that is a gift that we have given each other.
Yes, and I want to come back to shame and embarrassment in a moment and how you can tackle it. I want to go back. So you have two examples. One is a failure of character. This 9/11 example, by the way, I'm super emotional hearing you talk about it. And your book writing process. If I take your approach of walk into the failure, how would you do for both of those examples? The next time this happens, I will. Just to pull your approach all the way through. What would you say about both of those examples?
Yeah, I think the reason I think about the 9/11 example is not with self-flagellation. It is all about the next time I do this. That is why I walked out of the airplane, yesterday and said thank you to everyone who was picking up our trash, right? It's like my failure that day was to not see the humanity of this person in front of me. I used to go into Starbucks and, have my phone and be talking and multitasking. And the soundtrack to myself was like, I just want to go home and see my kids. Like, I'm not a bad person that I am not recognizing you. I'm like, I have 7 calls to make and I haven't slept and I just want to see my children. So that's not a bad goal, right? But it made me act in these ways. I feel like when we are tired and when we feel like our time is crunched is when we actually have the biggest sort of failures of character that, now I do not ever go into a cash register with my phone on. If I have to do that, I will just stand outside and I'm like, what is so important that I will not recognize this person's humanity by doing something else while dealing with them? I can wait for my coffee. I can skip my coffee. If I want to interact with a human being, I should give them my attention for 10 seconds. It's not that hard. And Yeah, so that's my like what I do differently every day. The reason I think about that moment is that I try to do that. What I will do differently is X, and then I do it.
Yeah, and I love that on your book thing, it was what I will do differently is like, I will rewrite the manuscript because all those failures, all those no's led to a maybe. And you're like, if it's a maybe, what is it that I can do to make this better to turn it to a yes? And that's one thing that I've learned from you is it's not a no, it's just not yet a yes. And you always tell me to be like, that means there's 2 or 3 more tries at the apple, right? Like that's literally, if you're not afraid of the failure, it's not a no, it's just not yet a yes.
There is a thing about that is a negotiating tactic. I learned that from my kids when they negotiated bedtime, because they are so good. They keep going. So one rule of negotiation is always keep the conversation going. Don't let it stop in an ultimatum, and save your emotional guns for last. So what happens is you're like, hey, it's bedtime. And they're like, one more story. I really want to read a book, and book reading is good for us. And so you might cave a little bit, and then you're like, no, you really have to go to bed now. And they're like, but Mommy, I haven't seen you in so long. They're like really good. And it's not, you just keep the conversation going, keep asking, because it's better to hear a no from somebody else than to give yourself the no in advance. And I think that's something that I see a lot of women doing, is that they will tell themselves no instead of letting the world do that. And I don't know if it's because we feel like we can't withstand that. And, the thing is, like, we are stronger than we know. When you look out in the world and all of the things that people are able to do. I mean, I think I have said to you that one of my biggest sources of inspiration is the women that I met when I was doing voter protection in Georgia. These are people, 100-year-old Black women who stood in line for 2 hours, who have not been winning elections their whole lives. And they still go out a perfect primary record. They vote every primary, every election. They are, the keepers of democracy, and also just such great sources of inspiration for resilience. Like, if they can wake up every morning and do what they do and continue to live their lives with all of the heaviness they're handling, that shows me that kind of strength is possible.
Well, I love that. And one of the things you highlighted earlier, when you think about fear of failure, and I love this idea of like, do we tell ourselves no before we've even gotten there? And let the world tell you no, and you can process that. You're strong enough to process that. Why do we talk about shame and embarrassment? Because I feel like that's why you tell yourself a no. Mm-hmm. You tell yourself a no because you're like, you know what? I'm probably gonna fall flat on my face and everyone's gonna be looking.
Yeah. So processing shame and embarrassment, there are 2 parts to that. One is the neurological piece, right? And so we first have to acknowledge that it does feel bad, like physical pain. But then there's a part of it that is about how much worse it is when you do it alone. And I don't know the scientific basis for this, but what we have lived, I think, as friends, and what I know is that it's a paraphrasing of Brene Brown, but shame can't survive the light of connection. And there is nothing more freeing when you're in a shame spiral than to pick up the phone and just tell someone, and somebody who will listen without solutions, without judgment. And it's such a great window into understanding someone too. So when I coach executives, that's the first question I ask in the very first conversation is, what are you ashamed of, or what are you embarrassed about? What did you do this week that you can't get out of your mind? Because that is going to be the window into all sorts of who you are as values and what you're trying to achieve. And and how you think about turning that moment of shame into something else, and whether you're willing to do the work to do it.
And one of the reasons we are shame buddies, and you coined that term in my life, which is shame buddy, is you and I have permission with each other anytime during the day to call each other and say, can I just say all the things out loud to you? And you taught me that if I say it out loud, I don't hold it in my own body. Mm-hmm. You'll hold it for me, and I don't feel alone anymore. I mean, I can't, we should just let our listeners know, I call all the time and I'm like, can I just say all the things? I need to make payroll. I might not make it. All the things that I'm so embarrassed about. And yet when I say it out loud to you, you'll hold it for me. And then one of the things I'll say, now I'm ready for you to problem solve. Can I just walk you through the worst case scenario? So a shame buddies really matters. Can you share with everyone the exercise you do with me around worst case, best case, and most likely? Because It's not just, you do that. You do hold it for me, but then when I'm ready, you'll say, should we do worst case, best case, most likely?
Yeah, I learned this around my husband's cancer diagnosis. I think we have a society that is sometimes like toxically positive. And the worst thing you can do to someone with a serious diagnosis is to say, think positive, because the flip side of that is like, the reason you're in the situation is because you're not positive enough. And that is not something that you need to tell someone who is dealing with a serious health crisis. So a thing that I think is really important is to spend a moment catastrophizing. Like, we don't have to avoid that because your mind is going to go there. And so say to yourself, what's the best case scenario that can happen out of here? I can do this with my book. The best case scenario is that it's going to be a New York Times bestseller and everyone will read it and have more empathy and will, care more about what happens to children in war-torn areas today and forever. Anyway, best case scenario. Worst case scenario, it never gets picked up. It never gets published. You're the only one who's read it 4 times. And then the middle case scenario is that somebody will publish it. Some people will read it. Hopefully it will, open the minds, or not open, but like create more connection between people in some way. And I think that's probably the most likely. But in the depths of despair, when you're like, what the hell am I doing? I'm a crappy writer. I should stop this. This is a waste of my time. Catastrophizing, being able to say, is that really the most likely scenario? It's super helpful. Like, when we're worried about, is so-and-so going to pay their bill, right? Then it's like, well, when you say, it's possible they won't, but okay, let's look at the history. They have paid all the time, long relationship, they're likely to pay. It's probably just because it's the end of the month and I'm worried about cash the way every entrepreneur is, that I feel worried. So is there data to show that you should be worried? But saying that, like, the best and the worst, and then putting the most likely in that framework, I think is really helpful. And I think we do people a disservice when we say, don't think about the worst case scenario. I say do, just make sure you do the last step of figuring out what the most likely scenario is.
And every time we do it, I feel better, stronger, more in control. And really, it's part of this whole philosophy you have around don't be afraid of failure, just move into it. And if you can imagine the worst case, you're pretty much prepared for, if that does happen, you're strong enough to face it. All right, we're going to do a little bit of a lightning round.
Okay.
What's one ritual, habit, or framework that helps you stay grounded?
Shame buddying.
I love
Saying
that.
your shame out loud.
Give our audience one way they can practice failure.
You can set yourself a failure goal. Like, just make it up right now. You can say, what am I trying to do? And how many failures do I want to give myself? And then, you know what? A really important thing is to have a reward for it. So if I get 3 failures, I will go buy myself a reformation dress. I will, take myself out for ice cream, whatever it is. I think it is important to reward yourself for that. But it is a real goal and that it's an important goal. So either have somebody else do that for you, but then you can combine the shame buddying and the failure goaling by saying, hey, will you take me out when I achieve 3 failures? But I think it's just do it right now for whatever it is that what are you most scared of? Set a failure goal and then give yourself a treat for when you achieve that.
I love that. And I love that you should track it and you shouldn't be afraid to hold it. When I was in the process of pitching my book and my agent went out and she said, we're going to have an 80 to 90% rejection rate. I have never been rejected 80 to 90% of the time in my life. Like even in college, I had 2 rejections out of the 10 schools I applied to, right? I was like, this is the opposite of my entire life journey. And I remember you and I were talking about it and you told me about how you collected rejections. And I told my literary agent, I said, I want to see every rejection email. She goes, I've never sent an author the actual emails when they got turned down. I'm like, I'm going to keep them. And first of all, I want to know why they think my baby's ugly, because there's some truth in there. There's something that they're feeling. And the rejections, because my agent is so well respected, were really thoughtful. Like, this feels cliched. I don't really get why she's the expert. And I was like, I like reading them because it shows me that when we do get a deal, what I need to overcome, right? What I need to make sure happens in the manuscript that incorporates their objections to why they didn't buy the book. And I remember that as you were starting your book, right, I forwarded you some of my rejection letters because I was like, you know what? These are the kind of things that I know I'm strong enough to hear and you're strong enough to hear. So I love the rejection tracker, and you inspired me to track my own rejections. Can you talk about when in the lightning round, you've had multiple teams and ventures. What's one way you encourage people to take risks and normalize failure in the workplace?
So we used to do this at Julep on Monday mornings. I had somebody talk about what a learning/failure from the previous week. So the thing is, you can tell people all day long, you're not going to be fired if you make a mistake or if something you work on didn't work out, but they don't believe you. And especially today with kids not being in physical work environments, it's really hard unless you see someone next to you actually fail and then not be fired. Like, I know people came to me and said, I can't believe, really, you're really not going to fire them. It's like, you have worked here for 5 years and I have never fired somebody for trying something that didn't work out. How is that not something that you believe? And I think in part it's because some of these things weren't coming to light. And so, every Monday at our stand-up, we would go through something that somebody tried that didn't work. And it normalized talking about that, because also, by the way, if we've done that before, one thing I know about companies, whether they're big or small, is that dumb idea comes back again. And the first time you do it, it's a learning, right? You try it, it didn't work, it did work, whatever. The second time you try something that didn't work, come on. The third and fourth time, shame on you, you have some kind of culture where you're not sharing those learnings from the first few times. And this is, frankly, most of corporate America, is that the bright new idea somebody comes up with, of course, has been tried 50 times before. I'm not saying don't try it again. Maybe the world has changed. Maybe you have a different take on it. But you have to know why it didn't work the last few times. And you also have to celebrate that. It's like, clap for the person. They tried something different. It didn't work, but maybe there's something we learned out of that we can build on for later. And also, aren't they strong because they got up in front of the whole company and said that they worked on something really hard for however long, months, and you know what, I was wrong, it doesn't work.
That is so different than what most people celebrate in the weekly meeting, right? Most people are like, what was our win of the week? Does anyone want to share their win?
Yeah, we did that too. I won't say we didn't celebrate wins. You have to celebrate every win, small wins, big wins, absolutely. So I think, but it's even more important in some ways to celebrate the hard things. Because then it also builds confidence in the entity and the company that we can do these things that are tough. We don't need everything to be easy because no startup has an easy path.
Yeah, it inspired my latest thinking around most improved player is as important as most valuable player because you've got growth. Out of curiosity, before I finish this lightning round, what percentage of products or ideas did fail, like when you tried them? What was your like failure rate in consumer goods and developing consumer products?
And it's that's a tricky question because I feel like it's iteration. So every product failed until it didn't.
Got it.
So you're constantly failing, and then you take that and you're like, okay, what if we tried this? What if we tried that? Especially in software where you can A/B test things and where you know right away whether it's working or not, for consumer pieces anyway. I think it's expecting that it's not going to work, or if it works, that it can work better. If you're tracking conversion rates, it can be better. It's not like, oh, this is what it is, now we go home and cry. It's like, this is what it is. What if we tried this? What if we tried that? Oh, if we try this, it goes down. If we try this, it goes up. So it's more like, instead of a percentage, it's like it's built into anything that is successful.
Yeah, and I saw that firsthand seeing your last company, Tokki, in terms of cloth bag number one and the bag that ended up at Target and Costco in millions of units, right? Having seen that journey.
So many iterations, yeah.
And it was recycled polyester or recycled plastic. Like that we started with high-end premium quality Japanese cotton. And then over the course, as you commercialized it and took it to market, it evolved into something so incredible. Like I remember the belly band with the QR code, and then all of a sudden we had this elegant, tag that was built into the bag. Just seeing that evolution, I love that you didn't describe it as failure. It was literally we're iterating to get to a commercializable product.
And the thing is, part of it was a better product, and part of it was learning. So we were a small company. I mean, at the beginning it was just me and my software engineering partner. And we didn't know everything about everything. So I started off with Japanese organic cotton because I loved the way that felt. It felt like this should be an heirloomy thing. And I was like, organic cotton, that sounds better than plastic. Then I learned that the water consumption in making organic cotton was made it much bigger of an environmental footprint than recycled plastic. And so the knee jerk, like we don't like plastic, we like cotton, ended up not being true. And there too, I think another way to think about failure and what you learn is not to beat yourself up too much. We were like, well, we did the best we could with what we know. And then I think it's Maya Angelou who said, when you know better, do better. So I think I got that right. Is that right? So try something. When you know better, do better. Because if you wait until you know everything to try something, you're never going to get there. Like I could still be researching environmentally friendly materials and not have ever started the company.
Do you believe great entrepreneurship, or even if you're not going to become an entrepreneur, just risk-taking in general, requires us to basically be experts at failure?
I do. And I think that is why we don't see a lot of great examples of it out there. I really am not into all of those sort of entrepreneur hero worship podcasts where it seems like they were such a genius and they just thought of this and now it's a publicly traded company. It's that the way that we lionize entrepreneurs, I think, is not helpful. So in my perspective, the entrepreneurs I look up to the most are the ones that show me that they can be thoughtful and do hard things, that they can think in more than one way, that it's not only about the profit line, but it is about what you're building that is unique in the world, and that you can do something, and then when you know better, that you do better.
I love that you taught me that it's okay to talk about all my failures, because basically it removes the mystique of it, of being an entrepreneur. Yesterday I did an event and a young woman said, oh, I want to start my own company, and what did you do, and all of those things in the Q&A. And I said, let's start off by, let me be transparent that 90% of my job sucks. And everyone went, oh, like there was a gasp.
I know.
And I was like, 90% of my job really, really sucks. I got to pay bills. I got to look at where the next dollar's coming from. I've got to deal with the problems no one else on my team knows how to do or wants to do. And I said, let's start off with, we've hero worshipped entrepreneurs to the extent where you just think, I have this great idea and I'm going to go raise some money and I'm going to do it and everything's going to be great. And I said, the 10% that is amazing is when I make a difference, when I feel the impact, where someone in our team gets to have this joy of doing something that they didn't think was possible. Where I was like, that's the 10% that's awesome. And then I was like, 90% really sucks. So just make sure you really want to do this.
I will come back to your question about pride, because I think I answered it like, what am I proud of, in the way I'm thinking about it right now, which is sort of in today at whatever time it is, how do I think about it? But if I'm thinking about over my career, like the thing that I'm most proud of with Julep is when I run into people and they remember that we talked about failure, and they feel like we had a courageous culture, and that we had a work environment that was hard charging but respectful and creative. And I thought that when you're building a company, there's so many things you're working on, and the thing that can kill you is running out of cash. So that ends up being so much of your focus. But these things that you do around culture, I think some of it was accidental or not super planned. Like all of these things I've said today have been a lifetime of figuring it out. I didn't know any of this when I got started. So the culture part, though, more than any product that is out there, I still use some of the Julep products. I love
do too.
Our cleansing oil. But I am most proud of the fact that we together, and it's not me, it's like all of us together, tried this thing, which is called doing things together that we hope will make our little part of the universe a little bit better. And we did it in a way that was as consistent with who we were as individuals and who we wanted to be as a company. No one can take that away. It's not quantifiable. And I didn't even know it until it's been a decade now since I ran Julep, and I still run into people who tell me what an important part of their careers being able to work in that environment was for them. And that is that really is everything.
All right, in closing, I want you to give our listeners, because whether or not they're working or in a leadership role and whatnot, can you give them one simple failure goal to try this week?
I think it's so dependent on what you yourself are trying to achieve. So I would just say whatever comes to your mind right now in what you want to accomplish next week, how do you turn that into something that you might fail at? So go 10%, 20% beyond what you thought you could do, because you're not going to get the failure if you operate at 80 to 90% of what you can do, you will always be successful. But if you try to go 20, 30% above what you think you can do, that's when you will probably fail, honestly, because the first time you try to do something far beyond your capability, it's not going to work. So you're most likely going to fail, but you will learn something from it, and then the next week do it again and keep upping the ante, not to be successful again, but really to just be, am I this week living who I'm meant to be?
Okay, so you want all of us, and I love this, to intentionally set goals that might not be achievable, just to stretch ourselves.
Yeah, not might, are likely not achievable.
Okay. So everyone this week is going to intentionally set a goal for something that is unlikely to be achievable, to stretch yourself.
Yeah.
All right, Dawn, what am I going to do? I need to like come up with one for myself now.
Okay. We'll talk about it over lunch.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on In Confidence, Jane. I'm so grateful to have you in my life.
I'm so grateful that you're doing this. This is amazing.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of In Confidence. I hope you're leaving this space stronger than when you got here. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this conversation, it's that failure isn't a flaw. It's actually a feature of ambition. When we set failure goals, we give ourselves permission to dream bigger, try bolder, and detach our worth from the outcome. Whether you're pitching something pretty audacious, asking for more, or going after something you might not get, that's where the growth lives. As Jane said to us, success isn't always about the yeses. It's about how many no's you were willing to collect along the way. So I want to give you all a challenge this week. Set one failure goal, something that might not work, but will move you forward just by trying. And if it doesn't go your way, it's not a setback. It's proof you showed up and you've learned and you've grown in new ways. I hope you loved this episode of In Confidence. If you did, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe so you never miss a moment of inspiration. And until next time, in the words of my 9-year-old self, I see you, I value you, and I believe in you. This is In Confidence.